Okay, so we're talking about the gold rush. This is a picture from the gold rush, noticing the guys using their sluice boxes and their pans on this side. This is a map that shows the different places that the gold rush took place. There's Sutter's Mill, where the gold was discovered, but there was lots of different other places where they were, and you can notice San Francisco in the corner. So they really concentrated a little bit, actually more near Sacramento, but also did come to San Francisco to arrive. So the objective of this lesson is to describe the impact of the California Gold Rush on original Americans, African Americans, Chinese Americans, and Euro Americans. So a little bit of a background, James Marshall had found gold near the fork of the American and Sacramento rivers on Sutter's piece of land. John Sutter was a sawmill owner, and they tried to keep it quiet because they knew as soon as they were able to, kind of explant, people found out it would be a mad rush for the gold. So they were able to keep it quiet for a little while, but then word got out, mostly from the workers on Sutter's sawmill land. So then tons of people from all over the world came. There were people from Peru and a number of South American countries who traipsed over the Panama Canal and got on a ship on the other side and then sailed up the Pacific Ocean to get off in San Francisco. There was Chinese who heard about it in China, and there were peasants trying to make a living. So a lot of males left China and sailed on a ship to San Francisco. People from the East were told about the gold rush, and they were super eager to take part in it. So they took some different trails, the California Trail and the Oregon Trail, all in search of the gold. It sparked a huge influx of people in California, mostly Europeans and Chinese. And it significantly impacted those who already lived there and also were taking place in the gold rush, the Mexicans and the original Americans. It was extremely hard to find gold. You had to stand in icy streams and sift through with these pans, and you had to kind of shift them. You'd scoop them in the water, get a bunch of rocks, and sift it out and see if you could find any shiny gold in it. It was a long, long days. And you had to buy a ton of supplies for it. So you ended up that you spent a ton of money, and actually it was extremely rare that people actually found a lot of gold. Really what ended up happening is that a lot of the gold was found by a couple people, and people kind of expanded on that. And so it became something where, a lot of people really said, oh, you can find riches, but it became really, really hard, and they spent a lot of money on their supplies. So it was really difficult. But the people who actually ended up making the most money were the people who sold their services or supplies to the miners. So like I said, you had to buy pans, you had to buy a sluice box, which you saw in the first picture. You needed clothes, you needed a place to stay, you needed food. So, for example, this is an advertisement of, all the things like that you could get. You've got your flour, you've got your, cornmeal, you've got your different cooking sets that people could make money off of. Okay, gold sifters, all the tools that you needed, like your different picks and shovels, pickaxes. So, this is gold washers and separators, ways to like try to sift through it. A lot of money could be made in that. You could make money. The famous example is Levi Strauss. Obviously, he made money off of this new material called denim, and he could make money off of those overalls, and that was a really great way that he could make money. So the miner, farmer, mechanic, and cattle raiser all over the West prefer Levi Strauss and Company's copper riveted overalls. Unfortunately, the gold rush also caused so like I mentioned before, it was a really negative impact on the original Americans. They enslaved them, they would kidnap them and sell them off, force them to work for the European Americans, and then they also killed them. It's estimated that there was at least 100,000 original Americans in 1846, 1847, and that by 1855 there was about 20,000. So that means about 80,000 were killed just in California alone. American historians agree that this was an all-out genocide, which is the massive murdering of thousands upon thousands of people. They took the houses from the Mexicans who were also living in California, because California was Mexico until 1848. And so they were robbing the people of their houses, kicking them out of their land, kicking them out of their fancy ranches. The Catholic missionaries were also living there and had really nice missions and had been working hard to do good works. And they were kicked out of those, and American Europeans were taking those places over for places of residence and robbing it of any riches. They also denied the Mexicans citizenship. They weren't allowed to testify in court. Original Americans were not allowed to testify in court, and some of the Chinese eventually also were excluded from this. So this is a picture of some Mexicans who had been forced to live in this really terrible house as a result. This is one of the scenes of the mass murdering that was going on, just blanket murdering. There wasn't even a war. There was no really call for what happened. And again, the just absolute turning all these Mexicans into poverty that had not been there before. They made the Chinese pay a tax for their earnings, and especially when the Chinese were doing better at gold mining because they were experienced in gold mining, the Euro-Americans kicked them out, burned their camps, and cut off their traditional hair braids until they left. They eventually lobbied the government to stop the Chinese immigration altogether. And that was called the Chinese Exclusion Act. So this is an example. It says, the first involved in petitions, the rate of license for Chinese minors shall begin reduced to the sum of $4 per month. So they have a $50 a person also tax that they had on their goods. All right, and this is an example of some of the that kind of advertisement. The positives were that it was a great opportunity for some women to be in charge or have more rights since there weren't as many of them. So like this woman called Lowenza Williams, she talked about the fact that she got to start a boarding house, and she says, it was a motley crowd that gathered every day at my table, but always at the coming the loud voices were hushed, the swearing ceased, the quarrels stopped. And deference and respect were readily and heartily tendered me as if I had been a queen. I was a queen. Any woman who had a womanly heart, who spoke a kindly, sympathetic word to the lonely, homesick men, was a queen, and lacked no honor which a subject could bestow. So again, that control that they had. And that's really, like, again, the main point. So going back to this page, we can describe the impact that it had. So thinking about the way that it had some strong effects on these different groups of people. Some of them are super positive. Levi Strauss and his ability to gain the boarding house or gain the money. Certainly women and their different rights. but some really mixed experiences for original Americans, African Americans moving west as well, and then the Chinese Americans really suffering a lot from the ways that our Euro Americans were targeting them really negatively.